emailed it.
It was
not like
today,
an agenda.
though.
It's just like
Sorry.
Tuesday.
We're good? Awesome. Welcome to the May 22nd meeting of the Facilities Improvement Committee. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's been approved. That's what they're asking for.
Okay, so...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I received feedback from a community member, and they asked that anyone sitting in the audience, if you could just state your name before you make any statements, because it was hard to tell who was saying what when they were coming off camera. So.
Yeah, well, we will certainly do our best with that. So we did, I guess, a piece of housekeeping. We had talked about maybe moving this meeting to the fire station because we thought maybe it would be a better layout. Unfortunately, that's not really an option for a couple of reasons. One, it's not available, and two, that's a heavy lift for Litchfield TV. So we will remain in this room. This is by far the largest committee that I've been a part of. That has to be televised, so we will certainly do our best. So if you're sitting over there and you can state your name every time you talk, we'll try our best. We'll see how it goes.
One day they'll be able to flash the name onto the screen.
Yeah, that's true. That'll be quite an investment, though. I don't know.
I have no doubt.
So that was one. That was one housekeeping matter. Another housekeeping matter. We had inquired about a minute, like a note taker for minutes. Unfortunately, that's going to be cost prohibitive based off of what's been budgeted. So I don't know if anyone in here is good at taking notes. Anyone want to throw their hand up? Oh, yes, Jen.
I'll do it.
Thanks, Jen.
Much appreciated.
Awesome. We really appreciate that.
Because I hate that
Chairman,
job.
would the video suffice?
I was wondering the same question.
Because it's really, I mean, no matter how good a note taker you are.
There's a lot of conversation.
The answer to that, from my point of view, is no, and I'll tell you why. Because I've just gone back through, I've been spending a lot of time going through the school board meetings, trying to get information. And you, two things. A, you can't review something anywhere as quickly as meeting minutes.
You're right about that.
And it's becomes very helpful, and you can print out if you find something that you need specifically. So I think meeting minutes are.
As long as everybody understands, I'm not going to do quotes and verbatims. I will not be able to keep up that fast. It's going to be general gist.
Quick summary.
Yep.
I think that's wonderful.
And I think it's imperative for members to review the minutes and compare it to the video. And if there's an issue, there's an issue.
Yeah, I think for just procedurally, I don't know that we'll necessarily vote to approve minutes, but if you review the minutes and there's an error, like it certainly makes sense to clarify them. So I appreciate that suggestion.
Can I ask a question for the people who joined, sorry, Marilyn Wade.
Very good.
Online, what platform are they using to join online?
That's a great question. Are we connected online right now?
Yeah, we're streaming on YouTube right now.
We're streaming on YouTube, but we don't have,
What about,
Did I log into Google Meet?
I'm logging into the Google Meet right now.
okay, yeah,
Is there people on Google
Brad
Meet?
Loeb is in the Google Meet at the moment.
Alright.
or Brad.
because you can use, I don't know, if you have access to Copilot.
Hi, Brad. We
it will
just-
take the notes for you,
Oh.
and then you just have to edit them, and it will give you summary.
Just
of-
logging in. Hang on
Copilot.
one moment.
Copilot, it's a Microsoft project, so.
We don't
it's a
have-
Microsoft app.
We don't have access to that. We have Google as our platform.
Much to my dismay.
Google probably has it. It's an
We can-
AI-generated set of
I'll,
items and notes.
I will,
I'm sure Google
We
has
can
it.
turn on captions and capture the captions. So, like as I'm talking right now, the
But what
captions
Marilyn's
are
talking about is even better. It's just, it
Yeah.
transcribes
But then-
notes.
There's plenty of software to do that without having to be Google or anything.
Yeah. What I'm saying though is the minutes, once we're talking now, and if it's loud enough to be heard on the computer, it will catch the captions and be able to retrieve those captions.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the AI apps are great because it gives you the summary, and then it also gives you, if people identify action items, it will target what they are and put it at the end of the summary for you.
I like that, yeah.
And then all you have to do is, it's learned machine learning, so once you do it a few times, it knows what you're talking about. and then
I jotted a note down. I'll see if there's something like that for Google that we can use. That was a great suggestion. Thank you for that.
As long as AI doesn't get a vote.
Excellent point, Rich. Wow.
Other thing that I wanted to circle back on, this committee had a discussion about the support staff and the mowing particularly. There was a great point brought up about some of the job postings as they relate to our custodial staff. I did forward that along. It was basically saying that it was kind of hard to really sort through the postings. They're not posted, the custodial positions aren't posted in enough places. I did forward that to HR to take a look at and see if we could be doing better with that to boost our chances of hiring. With that said, the BA did reach out to LSSA to start an initial conversation about outsourcing some of that stuff. So there are ongoing conversations on that. I don't have a final answer on that. I think those were my only points that I wanted to follow up on. Did we have any further discussion about the school dude audit stuff?
So, sorry, Daniel DeWitt. I didn't get anything from Dr. Jetty on it. I did look into what School Dude is. It is a product supported by Siemens, which is a very well-known software company for MESs and equipment maintenance. So, I mean, from what I saw online, I don't know what version is being run, if it's up to snuff or anything, but it should be a fine system to use. So I don't think we're gonna do drastic software changes. And to comment on the job postings, as I sent Matt an email, I kind of ran down a rabbit hole over the last couple of weeks of looking at the job postings, and one of the things I found was I could find other Litchfield School District job postings on Indeed and everywhere, but I couldn't find the custodial positions. I couldn't find the ground maintenance positions. And then, so I kind of just did a deep dive into it and just navigating the school district website as to where the full job descriptions were. Took me over an hour to go find them, which is, buried in a Google Drive. And I had several comments about how the postings are listed. And as a point of comparison, Hudson, right next door, has a grounds maintenance position open right now for a level 2 grounds maintenance, and they're offering close to $30 an hour, so $10 more than what is currently being offered from Litchfield. So just a little bit of context. I didn't know to blast it out to the whole group or not, or just to a single person and going from there.
No, that was helpful. I appreciate you diving into that. Go ahead.
Before you go too deep, do you want to take attendance?
Yeah, I'm working on that right now. So I have
Dan.
currently, I have Brad Loeb remote. I have Dan DeWitty present. Denise McHugh present. Jason Lamontan present. Joe Jositis present. Joe Lassard present. Kerry Douglas present. Marilyn Wade present. Rich LaSalle present. Bono Blinas present. Dan Mitchell present. Jen Grantham present. Matt Shoemaker present. Peter Plansky present. Who did I miss?
Bruno Ruthier.
Bruno Ruthier.
You, Brad, online.
I have Brad entered in as remote.
Awesome.
I'll wait till the end of the meeting and then I'll enter anyone who hasn't shown up at that point.
Perfect.
Absent.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Can
One day I'll be.
can you send those over?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry?
It's
Weeks ago, we were talking about doing a roster, a couple meetings ago, we talked about having a roster.
so we've made a little progress on that. We have a spreadsheet that does have
That's what
that we're taking attendance on. Yes.
Yeah, that showed up in that link, I think.
Yeah.
I'll have to check.
it's in
See,
the link?
I
Okay.
believe it may be in the shared drive.
Okay,
It is, I saw it earlier, yeah.
thank you.
And I will say that we went and backfilled it mostly from memory. So I believe everyone should have access to the attendance log. So if you see that we missed or misrepresented you as either present or absent, feel free to please, or I encourage you to please make corrections as you see fit.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the purpose of the attendance is, obviously we're going to be voting on stuff, and so the hope is that we don't want anyone to kind of just show up for one meeting to vote after they haven't participated in some of the fact finding. going back to the conversation about the postings, that was very helpful. Really appreciated the information. Thanks for taking the deep dive. I just want to point out that as it relates to pay, this group, we can certainly bring that back to the table. We can't affect that. That's based off of the contracts. It is an LSSA negotiating year, so we'll see what they.
Understood. It was just a point of reference.
Yeah, no, it's a good explanation as to why we might be having trouble filling some of those for sure. But we did do a midterm negotiation this year and did bring them up hopefully closer to where they should be, so that way we can maybe recruit. So, okay, so the next thing that we were going to move into, we had gone over mission, vision, governance discussion last time, and we had all come up with some suggestions and revisions. Dan has so graciously incorporated those into this document, and which has been handed out, and he has highlighted where the changes were. This was available to everyone before, right?
Yeah, this is, again, it's I don't know if you get notifications, but it's just living in the shared drive. So it's there.
I'll try to get better about letting you know when something's updated. But this was updated. I've reviewed this. I don't know if the committee wants to go through this, fully, or if people have already reviewed it and they're comfortable with it. I was comfortable with it.
I was gonna say, most of the stuff was based on suggestions that I heard in the meeting, but then as I was putting it into document form, I had to take some liberties. So for instance, I heard that the citizen co-chair was a good idea. We never got to how we picked that one, so I took a liberty of laying out a process for that. That's up for, again, that's more placeholder words, so we had something to work off. I may have hit the target, I don't know, but I under no illusions or delusions that I got this right. But I think based on the notes and the conversation at the last one,
Yeah, I mean, it was good. I mean, does everyone have a paper copy of it, or at least is able to see a paper copy of it?
I do have to change one thing, and I don't know how this happened. I'm going to make an effort. So, the title is the citizen co-chair, as you'll see in the description, but for some reason, in the title there, it says vice. So I don't know. Just a mindless moment there. Apologize.
It's always hard to see an educator make a mistake, and so.
We meet them all the time.
I'm just
All
kidding.
the time.
Does that? What does the committee think? Do you guys want to go through this, or do you feel comfortable with the way that we've amended this? Comfortable? Yeah.
Just one question.
Sure.
Josias. On the B non-voting membership, there's 1 and 2 of budget committee and ex officio. Is that just there to detail what C is?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, Dan? Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be repetitive, so.
Yeah, the discussion was
I
basically.
recognize that that's a reference not yet covered. It's referencing something to appear later, but it appears right next, so.
It works. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so, yeah, we talked about the administrators not having a vote in this, and they all felt like that was the right thing as well, so. All right, so I think if no one has any comments on this, no, there's no comments, right? If no one has any comments on this, then we're gonna consider this our final version of this, and this is how we'll conduct ourselves moving forward. And we will, that will be available on our Google Drive for everyone, and ultimately when we update the website, hopefully we can get that on the website too.
You're gonna vote on that? Accepting the articles?
I wondered about that. I don't know how you vote on something that lays out voting rights, but.
But I think because we're laying out the voting rights in here, I think.
All right. So,
Matt, let me ask you, is this something we just should have the board approve, the school board approve as it?
yeah, I guess we could do that.
Right, and then the school
All
board
right.
can vote on
We'll
it?
hold off on voting on that right now. We'll bring it to.
And then we can make motions and stuff like that.
Good
We can
idea.
Have somebody nominate for a chair, citizen chair, whatever.
Yeah. All right. That's a good plan. So that's what we'll do. We'll get that approved at our next meeting. Okay. The next thing that we were going to move into was the proposed survey questions. We don't have those printed out, unfortunately. I was not in my office today, so I did not have the ability to print those. Those were circulated via email, and I don't know if they were circulated today. I apologize. And I don't know if you didn't circulate them to everyone, right?
No,
You
I
sent it
just
to me?
sent you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
But this is our starting point for, we're just trying to get an idea of what types of stuff we might want to gather from the community. The next piece of this will be how we're going to gather that, but ultimately, I think there's a lot of information that we're hoping to be able to get to try to help guide us in our work moving forward. So, did anyone have a chance to see those? Couple? Awesome. All right, cool.
Question?
Yeah.
Did you put those together, Ron? Excellent job. The only comment, and it's a nitpick, but I have grandchildren in the school. I don't have children in the school. But where you said, do you have children in the school? I think you should add or grandchildren.
Could even go to just family.
Family member.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to go through them like one question at a time, because I think I got some comments on
Yeah.
a few.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. All right, so the first question as drafted was, based on your understanding of Griffin Memorial Elementary School, what are the conditions, if any, that need to be addressed? Check all that apply.
I'm just raising my hand, I don't want to speak out of turn. So,
Go ahead.
so Joe Lassard, this question to me, I don't feel like should be a question on the survey. I think it's our responsibility to detail in the forward of this survey what the issues are. If we can't articulate to the community what the issues are, that's a problem. Like, they don't know what the issues are. A lot of people have never been in the school. They haven't seen all the meetings like you're talking about. You can't sit through and watch meeting after meeting after meeting. It's our job to put some summary together of what the issues are. Asking them what they think the issues are, I think, is just going to lead to hearsay and people speculating about what they've heard on Facebook or somewhere else. It doesn't seem like it's a helpful question to ask, in my opinion.
Denise McHugh, I think if we say something like these are all known issues, because they are, and then asks people to rank the top 3 to 5, might be helpful to both educate and to find out what people are the most concerned about.
I would agree with that. Like, what are these are our known issues. What are your top 5 concerns that you would like addressed in any future school project?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
The reason I formed the question that way was, in fact, the whole context of putting the questions together was trying to understand what do people actually perceive at the moment. Not whether it's right, wrong, or whatever. The idea was, I think, behind it, was trying to understand what do people what is their perception at the moment, with the idea of trying to understand why would they then potentially vote the way they did. And how do we then respond to what they don't know or they had perceptions that we can then change? So that's the context.
I guess I understand that, but like trying to figure out what their perception is, I think is a longer way around of just detailing what the issues are and being factual about it and upfront about it. Like, I think that's part of the problem. Like, people don't know where to go to find the information, so it's a lot of speculation, and we're just going to chase our tail asking people what they're speculating about.
I would suggest, and I love the survey questions, but let's go forward. Instead of why did they vote how they did,
Agreed.
what will they vote
I have that
for,
feedback
and
right
what's
now.
the most important thing coming up that we can change?
So I think any question that we address, we should always come back to, we should always look at it from the viewpoint of what will we do with the answer to this? Like, how are we going to use this answer? And I think that one of the most important things that needs to come out of this conversation is figuring that piece of it out. Because I think that there is, in my opinion, there is a lot of value to, for example, like, I understand Ron's perspective here. Like, it might be helpful to know, okay, we've touched on all these points. Why have certain things not resonated? Or are these things not
I think those are
important?
different questions.
Yeah.
Those are different questions than asking them if they understand the conditions of GMS, right? Like, nobody understands the conditions of GMS unless you've gone through all the documentation like Ron has, or been to the school and seen the things. We need to detail that for people so they know what the issues are. Because I can tell you, I know plenty of people that have never set foot in that school and have no idea what the issues are. And we're going to ask them to try and tell us what they think they know?
If I may, on that makes sense. If you worded it are you aware of these issues at Griffin? Check all that apply.
And then I like her comment of rating them based
on
more
you can rank them. But also, if we're going to do that, the wording of a couple of the things like additional classroom space, that additional classroom space isn't the problem. Lack of classroom space. So it's important how we word these things so people understand what it's
additional sounds like a nice to have, where lack of sounds like a need.
There's not enough room for the
Physical and
people.
expansion,
Big and room.
So, I'm jotting down the notes that you're suggesting. So again, this is like this was Ron using his brain to just
Yep.
No, it's a great.
And
dump all this stuff out. So I appreciate that.
Matt, just so you know, I'm also typing as much of what people are saying as possible in the minutes here, so.
Cool. Yeah, I'm on the.
happy to
I
volunteer
created a
to run a
Google
second
Doc
draft
of this,
if
so
that's
I'm typing comments on it.
And I've added a copy of the survey questions so that the original stays
Clean.
unaltered. And I've made a copy which is in the shared drive that everyone can see, and I'm putting comments on the side. So we're gonna have.
Oh, you're doing the comments?
We're having a lot of notes on this one.
Okay, well then I'll stop doing that because I think I may be doing it on
So
the original
can
one.
we all log in and,
Yeah.
can you put it in red line strikeout mode so we can log in and edit it and people can see?
I've been doing it. I started doing
Yeah,
it
so
as comments.
there's an original one that will leave. There's
Yeah.
a copy of that's living in the drive that you can
All right, I'm gonna delete
hack
that.
away at.
I think those are good initial comments on this question. I think let's continue through and see if the other comments help us inform how we might address this first comment. So based on your understanding, has there been sufficient study done to investigate the condition of the current GMS building regarding potential restoration for current use either in whole or in part? Go ahead.
Sorry, I got a lot of comments. I went through this earlier. I think that falls in my same bucket as that first question. I mean, until I joined this committee, I had no idea what other studies have been done. Like, it should be part of our when we send this out, here's a packet that tells you.
We don't know, I'm gonna challenge you on that, because we don't know the answers yet.
I mean, we don't know the answers. We don't know what studies have been done already?
We don't know we know there's a lot of studies.
Okay.
We really don't know the condition of the building as we have talked about in full context.
That's a
As a
different
for
question,
instance.
though.
Huh?
The question's about, do you have an understanding of the studies that have been done? So if there has been studies done, regardless of the outcome of those studies, we should be upfront about what those studies were, not ask.
Well, the question is asking, has there been sufficient studies? Like, do you? And I think that
But nobody knows what the studies are.
Study
You
might
tell
be a
them
bad
first.
word. I think study's the bad word. I think it's not a study. It's more does everybody understand what the board has gone through to reach the point, right? I don't think it's specific to the two studies that were
So,
recently done.
has there been sufficient investigation of the current condition of GMS?
Something like that.
What does that get us?
I think the fact that we hired a very reputable architect, and he has seen buildings similar to this in the past, we could open the tiles, we could look at every nook and cranny, but he has a good idea.
Well, so it's not about what our opinion is, though. What we have to find out is
But
does
the
the
expert
commu-
that we hired, his opinion.
Right, but what we're trying to get to is, does the community feel as though enough? Because one piece of feedback, as we comb through the mountains, mostly of Facebook comments, was a lot of people felt like there wasn't enough investigation done, right? And whether or not that's true, right, is a separate question.
So I think that's how I would change that question then. I would lay out what investigations have been done and say, do you think these investigations were sufficient? Or do you feel there are other areas that need to be investigated?
I can't. You couldn't do that. It took me, and I haven't studied them all. It's taken me hours.
So
and
how do you
hours and hours.
expect a person that hasn't done what you've done to be able to answer that question? Honestly and truthfully.
Well, remember,
I think they're answering it based off of their perception, right? Which is how people are
the
voting.
optics.
remember the intent here is trying to understand why voters voted the way they did. It's
No,
this.
I don't think that's the intent at all.
Can
I
I ask-
disagree that that's the intent. I'm sorry, I do. Like, I don't need to know why people voted the way they do. I need to figure out what the next step is and let's move forward.
Well, I guess that's
Reliving the past and rehashing how everything went down in the past is not going to get us forward in the future.
Well, between you and the fence post, then this is worthless to even do that.
I don't disagree. I don't agree with that. I think there's good questions in here that'll help us get there. we need to work on moving forward and not reliving the past.
I would suggest that they have looked at 9 different ways in the past, and if we ask specific questions for those 9 different choices, I think we will get the answer moving forward that we need, without going backwards.
Exactly.
So
Can I interject for a minute? I know I'm
Yes.
next officio, but I just wanted to make.
you're
a quick
not, doesn't mean that
statement.
you're mute, that you were allowed
I'm
to
not
talk.
mute. I'm just gonna put a thought out there. I'm hearing perspectives right now coming from different spaces and places, and just to kind of surmise, what I'm hearing Mr. Lassard say is I'm hearing him say we need to ask people based on these facts that we know. This is the information that came out. If it's a Cliff Notes version of all the research that Mr. Obelinas has done for.
Even just the titles.
Yep, here, this is the research that we did for this purpose. Is this sufficient data for you to make an educated decision, or do you feel like there's more? Because I think what we heard loudly and clearly from voters out in the community is that people didn't feel well informed. Was it because they didn't spend 65 hours going through 87 pages of document, or was it because we didn't do a good enough job?
So I
informing?
think that's a good point. I think that maybe what we need to do before we even get too far into these is maybe we need to come up with a list of what do we want to learn, so that way we can back ourselves into, so that way we can look at the questions from that framework. Because I don't necessarily agree that I do think we need to understand the past a little bit, because that's going to help us understand how we can do a better job in the future based off of how people made decisions.
I totally agree with you in certain aspects of that, right? I don't need to know why people voted how they voted. I need to know what their drivers are. What's important to you about the school? Is it education? Is it the facility? Is it the students? Is it the teachers? What drives you in your decision making when it comes to a school project?
But sometimes,
Didn't work for you in the past.
so here's a really good example of why I think approaching it from both ways makes a lot of sense. When you ask people in Litchfield about wanting to see economic development, right? Most people love farms. They don't want to see economic development. They want to see the farms, but they also want their taxes to go down, right? So sometimes that same want is in conflict in 2 different ways. And so my thought is, if you ask the question by saying, why did you vote no on this? You may get an answer that they're not even recognizing it as their answer. You know what I'm saying? Like they may say, well, moving forward, here's my driving factors. But we may also get a little bit of a different perspective if we understand why they voted no on something. So I think that there may be value in both.
I get you, and I just want to be careful with the questions we ask so that we don't end up stuck in the mud of why such and such a bond didn't pass, or this thing didn't happen, or I didn't know about this information or that information. Like, that doesn't help us move forward. Understanding if people felt informed will help us move forward. Understanding how people get their communication will help us move forward. Understanding their wants and their needs will help us move forward. Those are the questions and things we need to answer.
I think the other thing that is clear on any survey ever designed anywhere, survey writers can skew a perspective
100%.
based on what the perspective is. So what we, in my opinion, as a committee need to do is stay neutral.
Yeah, we don't want to
We
do
are
that.
not going to lean towards having a school, sorry Dan, I'm not leaning towards having a school new, not leaning towards.
Right.
We have to stay down that neutral path to allow the community to give that feedback, to say, hey, this is what happened, this is where we went. But if we go down one direction, it's going to make a population upset. If we go in another direction, we have to stay neutral to allow the community to give that feedback.
Couldn't agree with you more.
So can we have a preliminary conversation then and brainstorm what it is we want to learn? Like, why don't we just get a few notes out, jotted down about what we want to learn? And then as we go through these questions, we can come back to, does this help us achieve what we want to learn?
Can I make a teacher suggestion?
Yes, teacher.
If we broke up into small groups of 3 or 4
Your
people,
favorite thing.
to break up to have a quick conversation and then each group report out versus
My only
individual.
concern with that is this is a televised meeting, so is that going to become very confusing?
If we do it for 5 to 10 minutes, I
think you
think
can kill the mics and then each group has to report out.
report out what they're.
Are you able to like stop the mics for if we do that?
So we're doing a group project now?
Like, all of them?
Breakout.
All of them.
Yeah.
Breakout groups, that's what it is, but
All
it's,
right.
I think it allows everybody to have a voice.
What is
All right.
the objective from the, what do the breakout groups have to report back? What's the
I think
problem formulation for us?
great question. I think what we're looking for right now is what do we want to learn from reaching out to the community. So if we could come up with, each group come up with a few points on what we want to learn that we think will be helpful to us moving forward as a facilities committee, the overarching concepts will then help us drive how we rephrase some of the questions, or if we even need to rephrase some of the questions. If you have a comment, we're welcome to.
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right, let's do that then. We'll just jump into groups of, I mean, it looks like 3 or 4, maybe. Yeah? There. You must love this as a teacher, yeah?
I throw things and launch things. I teach physics.
All right, why don't we go ahead, just for the ease of anyone that does watch this, and so you don't hear a million voices, we are gonna cut the mics for this, and then the groups will report back, so you'll be able to get what the content of the discussions. All right.
So do we want to just move to
Yeah, let's just
pockets?
do this
Three?
group. Maybe you two break into 2 groups. One group here, one group here.
You want to come?
Oh.
There we go, thanks.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is, we're gonna go through to each group, and we're just gonna kind of compile all the points and see if we can boil down a final list of things that we want to learn, the overarching concepts that we want to learn from what we're trying to develop. Yes.
Point of order, we had another member join. If they could just announce their presence, please.
Oh yeah, yeah. We now have to say our names in the audience.
Brad Lowe. I was remote, now I'm in person.
Oh, thanks, Brad.
Oh, so
We
I can
appreciate
turn
it. Yeah,
off
sorry,
to
we
look
were.
at my nose anymore. That's great.
I was driving, so I wasn't able to look up your nose.
Good.
Okay, so I don't mind starting up here since I'm already up here. When you come to report out for your group, I'm just going to have you come to the table because it'll be easier for the camera to pick up who you are and whatever. The things that we covered in our group were from a broader perspective. There's been 9 options investigated. We feel as though in some capacity it's important to understand people's either willingness or aversion toward each of those options. So, a good example is, because this apparently keeps coming up and even came up at the 8th grade move-up day, people thinking that we're closing the high school and it's getting shipped off to another town, right? Like, we need to know, but ultimately, like, that is one of the options that was evaluated. We do need to know from people, is that something that you'd be open to or not? So we felt like looking at each of the options and just asking specifically, is this an option that you would find suitable in some way? Now, we're not figuring out how to ask those questions right now, just like overarching principles. So tying into that might be what other options should we be investigating? How important is educational impact of our decisions? Like, from a perspective, maybe that may be balanced against cost or whatever, but is that something that's an important consideration for the community? This is a hard one to ask, but what is a max price point that you feel is acceptable for finding a solution, right? Like, I don't know. It's a hard question, but it's also,
We're gonna know that.
they won't, but yet some people have, seem to have rooted themselves in various numbers. So if they have, I'm kind of interested to know whether or not we could hit it is another question. And then another question that we had was, how important is it to find a long-term solution versus a shorter-term fix? One of my personal concerns throughout this whole process is I don't want to advocate for something that then in 10 years people say, why did you advocate for that? Your name, your name's in the record on that, and why didn't you think of this? So that's one of my biggest fears with this. So those were the kind of 5 things that we came up with. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
All right, come on up to the table.
On down.
I am
Is
Joe.
everybody okay if I just label you group 1, group 2, group 3?
Sure. I am Joe Lassard. I'll let the rest of my group introduce themselves because I can't remember everybody's name. We were the back corner group.
Bruno.
Denise.
So we narrowed it down to kind of 4 overarching themes. Number 1 being, are you informed about the current school conditions? And that can be any number of things, whether it be maintenance problems, broken things, just overall size, classroom configuration, whatever you want it to be. You can come up with a myriad of questions around that. Question 2, I think, is one of the utmost importance of this entire project. How do you best communicate? How do you want your information? Do you get it on Facebook? Do you get it on Litchfield TV? Do you get it in the newspaper? I think Ron had a question in his original surveys that was around that. Like, I think that is a crucial question on how we move this forward. Because I think some of us, even in this room, didn't know when meetings were happening or things were being discussed and don't feel informed. So we need to figure out how we best communicate with the public. Third one is, what's important to you in a school environment? Again, that can be any myriad of questions, whether it be classroom size, certain conditions, certain technology, whatever it is, what's important to you in that school environment. And then, what is your desire / driver around a future school project? And that could be anything from a remodel, kids going to other schools, kids combining schools, or a new building, whatever the other options are, the 9 or whatever so options you are. I don't know if we're going to investigate all 9, but how do we narrow that down and gauge people's desire about specific initiatives?
So I don't know if you got this far, but are you almost envisioning those are sections of the survey, like almost?
Those
like,
are the overarching themes. Like
yeah.
that, those
So
are like
it could be sections of the survey, and then like each one of those section titles, if you will, or it almost sounds like gave descriptions. Each has 3 or 4 questions underneath it that susses it down.
yeah. They're themes of information we want to know, right? Like it's not getting into specific questioning,
Yeah.
but these are the overarching themes of what information we need to get out of a survey. What I do want to caution, and like we do a lot of marketing in my company and stuff, and like survey fatigue for people is a real thing, right? Like the survey needs to be concise. You get into a 20, 30 question survey, people are out. They're not doing it, right? Like if it's over 10 questions, forget it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's grab someone from your group.
Group 3, I guess.
3.
Dan DeWitt.
Meryl?
Brad. Brian.
Joe?
We kind of had one central theme, but as people were talking and as I kind of recounted what we talked about, kind of grabbed onto a couple of others. Essentially, it's does the community understand the current conditions and deficiencies of GMS? And we got to distill and we got to provide that information in a distilled list, not 17 reports, not 60 meg PDFs, but it's got to be a distilled list. And essentially, did you know that there are multiple surveys on the conditions of GMS and what they covered? Right? I didn't know about all the surveys. I didn't know that there was 9 options until, or ideas proposed until I came to this committee. Other things that we kind of looked at was touched on was the educational impact of, all the different options, and what that has. And again, central themes, don't know how to distill that. I don't think we've gotten there yet, but
Would you say that the discussion around educational impact was more in line with our group as to like how important is that, or was it more around, do you understand like even what that would look like?
I think it encompasses all the above, right? So it's not only how important it is, because frankly, if we're going to go build a school and we're not going to put that at the top of the list for the future generations, I think that we've already started off on a bad foot when we're designing a new building or a new additions or whatever we want to do. But the other option, the other side of it is, do we understand what happens when we make, I'll say, facility and infrastructure decisions, and how that affects quality of learning and teaching and working and staff, etc.
Can I just chime in on that? Because I know this group was new since we had the facilities committee before. As a principal of a school that has been under construction since I've been there, and you see me start to twitch as I do this conversation, it is incredibly disruptive to the learning environment to have live construction happening.
Absolutely.
During the school year, having the solar panels delivered and large cranes hoisting things outside the window and things like that. It's something on the roof, and I just want to make sure I'm saying that aloud.
Thank you for reiterating that point. I do want to just make sure that we're sticking to, so again, this is about what are we trying to get back from the community. So I want to be careful not to go into what we want to necessarily convey to the community.
Right, correct.
Okay.
It's for me, it's do you understand the educational impact of each of the options that have been presented?
Right.
And how that goes forward.
Right.
You being the survey responder?
Yes.
Was there anything else in your group?
That was it. Did I miss anything? Did I overstate?
Well, the same thing he said is key to know how people communicate. How they
Yes.
get to-
Yes.
What was number 2?
That was the educational impact.
I know, but can you,
Group 2 or?
no, his item number 2, I couldn't understand what you were, sorry to ask.
So the first. Sorry, did you want to read it back or?
What I have is multiple surveys on GMS and what they have covered.
Yes.
So the explorations of where the condition of GMS is, the water tables, et cetera, is what I read that as.
It's like the 5 reports since 2007, I think, is the earliest one that I've seen. Or, sorry, going back to even earlier than that.
I'm almost wondering, and I know I'm breaking my own rule right now because I said we're not going to go like into the weeds on this. But I think that there may be a component of this where we have to, and again, I'm worried about survey fatigue, but we may have to provide some information about, hey, these things were conducted. Do you think that, do you feel as though that was enough, right? Or maybe that's not the best way of saying it, but.
Yeah, exactly. Just general themes of possible questions, not trying to narrow in on what those questions
Right. I mean, I think that
should
what we keep coming back to is actually the overarching question that Ron posed, which is what we're trying to find out from people is, do you feel like enough exploration was done? I think that what we're now evolving into is we need to help people understand what has been done so that way they can decide whether that actually was enough. I think that we may have had a problem where people may not understand how much was done, but we also need to understand, even in light of that, would you have considered that enough to be able to make a decision at the polls?
Yeah, I mean, I think that point we were just talking about falls into that theme we had in our group of, are you informed of the current school conditions? And that could be a myriad of questions surrounding any of those reports or all of them.
I'd be cautious about a myriad of questions. I think.
No, I'm saying, you can come up with any number of questions you want,
Right.
any theme or I'm not saying there will be, I'm just saying you can come up with all kinds of different questions around a theme.
Right, I question the necessity of it though, because everyone I know that voted no agreed that something needed to be done. The investigation was more related to the lack of investigation or the perception of lack of investigation, alternate options. Not so much in, does GMS need something done? Everybody I know who voted no said, yeah, we agree, something needs to be done. I don't feel that there was enough exploration of my options. So if we focus so much on GMS, are we losing the opportunity to get into where people truly felt they needed more information? If most of us agree, or the people out there already agree that GMS needs some work, is asking them about what they need.
That goes with our fourth theme of what's your interest in the future
Yeah.
school project. And
Yeah,
that could go down those roads of all these other options that were investigated and
Right, so I'm
how do you
saying-
feel about them?
I wouldn't necessarily focus too much on, do you know that there's not enough classroom sizes? I think most people agree, something needs to be done.
No, but some of the feedback that I've received was, as it relates to, okay, well, you proposed a school on the new site, but I'm not convinced that that site actually is suitable for a school. Right,
Right,
so
so
we got
that's
some of
investigating
that.
alternate options, not so much, do I believe that there's enough classrooms at a GMS?
Oh, yeah, I
So I
agree.
worry that you were focusing too much on how well people understand the individual and shortcomings of GMS, because I think as a community, people agree they exist.
Do they?
So,
I mean, do we know that for a fact? I mean, you know that from the people you've talked to, but like, I've talked to people that think the school's fine.
Could you do two surveys, one with some of these general questions? I don't know, you have more experience, it sounds like, than I do with surveys, but if we had one short survey that had more general questions and we got some more background info, some general knowledge of people's opinions, then you could focus your second survey with some clear, concise questions, pointed.
are you
Whatever
interested in
direction.
taking a more in-depth survey? Yes.
So you can do stuff like that, but it needs to be like spaced out appropriately, right? You can't be like, hey, here's today's survey, and then next Monday, here's another one.
I mean,
Right? Like, it's gonna be like, all right, we're gonna take this information we got from the first one, we're gonna do some work.
Well, it has to be
2 or 3 or
sensible.
4 months
It
later,
has to be a
here's another
sensible
one.
flow too, right? Like I would think that the second one would also be trying to boil down more of what we've gotten back, right? Because it may be, as Carrie's pointing out, like we may be, one of the things we're going to be asking is, how'd you feel about all of these 9 options, right? Like, were these favorable to you? And if we find out if 80% of people said we want to ship our kids out to a different town, right? Like that's like, okay, like
Right.
that's something we
We
have
have
to,
direction
we now are going to focus on that, and we're going to actually maybe come up with another survey that has more detail that's
Where do you want
geared
to go?
towards. Right.
I think whatever survey goes out, however it's written, the information that comes back has to be actionable. If we're just
Right.
asking questions like, what do you think?
Right.
And then we have nothing to go. No.
Right, I agree.
We have
haven't
one
heard
more
from this group yet.
So, we came up with the same question these guys did, what is the town willing to pay? Rich brought something up that when Campbell was built, Bill Spencer went to the committee and, went to you or the committee and said, what do you think the town is willing to pay? Right, so that may be, and for the committee, it's my understanding that they were, okay, well, that's the number, right? we have to solve the problem within that number. And then I think that leads us to what do we do? The biggest survey, I think we should all understand the elephant in the room. My belief, and a lot of the people that I talked to on both sides, the price tag was just too high. And, you know, so that number was too big. So what can we do under that number? I don't know what that number is. Is it 25 million? Is it 30 million? But I think we have to look at all options and still focus on GMS, but see what else we can do with the other buildings to accommodate the current population and what our anticipated growth and reduction is, right? Right now, I think, we were talking about Callaway Circle and that Weatherstone. The anticipation was there was gonna be a ton of kids entering the school district. There was 12 or 14 that have come in through there.
Right.
So we don't know what's gonna happen with the over by the horse farm. We don't know what's gonna happen, at the old BAE site. I think there's been 3 kids so far out of the
So
the horse
Kyle is working to update enrollment projections, and I don't want to misspeak because I didn't fully wrap my head around it, but he had said something to the effect of factoring in birth rates or something like that. He basically had highlighted the fact that we as a town with our current build out had been at a much higher level at one point, and so we need to also be factoring in birth rates as opposed to just developable land, because I was focused on developable land, right? Like that seemed like the logical thing for me, and he said, well, it's not just that, because you as a town were much closer to capacity at one point based off of birth rates. So he's like, we have to look at that information. So
and birth rates are down, right? People aren't having as many kids as they used to.
If I could expand on what Peter said there for a second, I think we need to come up, and this has been bandied about, we do need to come up with a figure that we feel that the town can afford. And I go back, and Marilyn, you can chime in on this. When we were working on Campbell, we worked and worked and worked, and we had various options that we could go. Do we build an auditorium? Do we build a track? What's the level of technology that we have, and so forth? And Bill Spencer, after a while, you got all this stuff going on in your head, and it's kind of overwhelming. And Bill Spencer said to me, he said, what do you think the town can afford? And the school board and I came up with a figure of 12 million that the town could afford.
How'd you come up with that? Like, what?
My question. How did
Well,
you come up with that number?
It was sort of a swag. It was, all right, but
12 million.
But in analyzing, everything that was happening, what is the level of technology? What is that going to cost? What's the value of an auditorium, and what is that going to cost? We could have gone to the nth degree if we wanted to, but we knew the town couldn't afford that. But my point is, once we came up with that figure, and we gave them a figure, 12 million, he said that took a tremendous weight off his shoulders. And he said, we can build a wonderful facility, and the number came in at 11.8. So there you go.
Who was he?
Bill Spencer, the chairman of the budget committee and on the building committee.
So, that kind of process makes great sense to me. I don't know if that was done with the original proposal that was just put out there. Like, you make a list of needs, like we have to have these things, right? Bathrooms, classrooms, all those things. Those have a cost, and then you have a list of wants, a track, an auditorium, whatever these other things are, and then that's how you come up with your price.
Right. I think when it comes down to, if we're gonna try to evaluate what people in the town think we can afford, then we have to it almost has to be done on a, like, they're not gonna be able to say, like, we can afford 12, like, they don't know what that equates to.
No,
So we're
they
gonna have to
don't know.
find a way to, like, figure out.
They estimate, like, when we lost $2 million way back when, they had meetings in the auditorium, they said, all right, how much do you think you can afford your taxes to go up? All right, I think I can afford a 3% increase.
I
So-
think that's the way it's gotta go.
Yep.
So I think what we need to say is, okay, community, how much of an increase can you, with wherever your wages are, whatever you're facing at home, how much can you absorb into your family budget? And then we can actually back that out into an annual payment and back that into an actual budget.
And there has to be some wiggle room.
Well, obviously, you're gonna have change orders, you're gonna have unexpected conditions, but it gives you a starting point. If-
Well, and we can also go back to people at that point and say, all right, so within that budget, here's what we can get, here's what we have to leave on the table, here's what we can achieve with that budget. And, you know, at that point, if there's things that are so critically important, maybe people will look at that and say, no.
Or it becomes like when you buy a house and you're like, oh, I need this, and then year 2, I'm gonna do this, and year 3, I'm gonna do this. It becomes a capital plan.
One other point that I'd like to make, and we've talked about the possibility of consolidating or possibly sending kids outside the community and so forth. And I think we need to also keep in mind, when we're talking about the schools, when a community has a fiber, it has, there's more to a school means more to a community than just the education function. Like the fact that we have Campbell High School has meant so much, and I'm not just talking because I was connected, but it has meant so much to the community. It has given the community an identity that it never had before. Now, with respect to consolidating schools, I know I've been through situations where schools have contracted because of poor population or whatever. They've contracted, and at some point, communities have lost a school. And when a community loses a school, in many cases, that community is on its deathbed. So, to my way of thinking, we need, I know it's more expensive, but we need to maintain an elementary school and a middle school and a high school. And, you know, we know there's contraction now, but it hasn't always been that way. In the 90s, we had 5 to 7% per year increase in school population. And we had the opposite problem that we have now. But, you know, we can put some classrooms in mothballs if we have to, you know, and who knows what the future may bring. But whatever this survey says, somehow we have to get a feeling from the committee. All right, how important is it that we have a high school? How important is it that we have a middle school and an elementary school? Because in my mind, as an old fogey who, you know, is running out of grandchildren now, but that's important to me, that the town, it means more to the town, and that's just my...
I think you hit on an important point that I think is really important and hard to achieve when it comes to surveys, which is also being able to provide a certain level of education about what do these things mean. So those of you that worked on the Campbell project probably freshly remember that was done with some level of pressure from the fact that you had to solve an urgent issue that was relating to the fact that we weren't going to have somewhere to send our kids, from my understanding. I wasn't here at the time.
That's true.
And
Absolutely.
so I think we as a committee need to also help people understand when they're answering these things, hey, you know, that is an option, but just, you know, be aware that when we're looking at the 10-year, 20-year scope, that could be something that we face if we decide to pare down to less than 3 schools.
Well, and I just want to clarify to your point, which I think was all great stuff. You're not just talking about a number on a new school build, right? That number we got to come up with could be for whatever project we decide is going to be the proposal.
Whatever the configuration is.
Whatever it is,
To solve
what's
the
the
overall
number to solve the problem?
Right.
If I could just.
We got 3, yeah.
add to that. You know, my recollection was we had so many disparate groups, all of whom had reasons they would not vote for the high school, and we had to figure out ways to get them all at the table and moving in the same direction. And I think there was a lot of back and forth through Bill with the budget committee about what number they could get behind, because this town has a history of voting no against things that the budget committee doesn't vote for. There was, and you did say it, you know, it needed flexibility and stuff, but the original number was lower, and it was, we don't need a track, we don't need an auditorium, you know, it was we can only afford the bare bones and everything. But then when you got to talking to the community about the educational and community benefits of having an auditorium, you know, it was okay. And there was, you know, there were things that, you know, it started out, we will not have football and we will not have gymnastics because those are the two sports that jack your insurance up the most and cause the most injuries. And then, you know, so a few years later, and we're not gonna build the tennis courts now, but we wanna have tennis later. So there was a lot of those, these are the things that are critical to education. These are the things that some people considered optional because they were trying to get to a lower number. And I include the auditorium and the track in that. But over time, it was, you know, we were persuaded to the educational and community benefits of having those things outweigh the incremental increase in cost. And then there were things that we really would have liked to have had it, but it didn't satisfy, or it didn't reach as many people as some of the other options, and those things were deferred. And, you know, the football people organized in this community and came back several years later. Tennis was no longer that popular, so the area that was supposed to be tennis courts became the football team's practice field, and the soccer field became a dual-purpose soccer and football, and, you know, eventually it had a grandstand. This started out as we absolutely are not putting any lights on any sports field, and now, right, so it isn't the end of, it's not, this is all we're gonna do and that's all we're ever gonna do. But it was definitely a lot of horse trading.
Did you end up having budget committee support?
Yes.
You did? Awesome. There was a couple, I'll get to you, but there was a couple back there that had, go ahead, you were first.
Jason, he's being bandied around about sending our kids to other schools. Do we actually know what the cost of that would be to us? Because we have to pay for that.
So as far as where we're at right now, we're talking about what do we have to gather information on, right? And so,
do we actually know what that answer is? Because I have neighbors who said, oh, if we need to send kids to Hudson or Manchester, they just think it's a free thing. They don't realize there's a cost associated with that.
You can look up the local towns, what their tuition rate is.
But that's for their own students. What they charge?
What they would charge, what they charge per
okay.
people, and then add on to that transportation.
Okay.
yeah.
It gives you a ballpark. You can't get the exact number.
But
that's a
ultimately, ultimately, we as a group won't take too much action on that until we get feedback from the community, whether that's something that, and we as a group have to decide what sort of level of support do you have to see from the community to actually even go investigate that.
And that's an ongoing cost that doesn't go away.
Right. And it's also a cost that we don't have any direct.
We have no control.
We have no control.
Zero control.
So, in the back, yeah.
The other thing about the survey is sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'll come back. I'll try to remember.
I'm Denise again. As far as rehabbing the GMS school, what I'd like to see on any survey that goes out is a cost differential between bringing it up to code and not bringing it up to code. Because I think it's really important that if we don't bring it up to code, people realize that they're going not to have a sprinkler system and all the safety issues, not bringing the portables necessarily into the school itself. Because rehabbing means a lot of different things to a lot of people.
To clarify, I think, and I'm just based on our experience at LMS, once they take a ceiling tile down, if they find something that violates code, they touch it, they own it, and we're stuck fixing it.
So Kyle touched on this briefly, and I think that once we work through, Kyle, so we're going to we'll follow up on this after, but once we work through the issues at GMS, which Kyle is going to come back and do more in depth, he'll have a better ability to tell us what specific things, if we touch them, would have to be brought up to code. So we will have a specific answer on that, whether there's an option for,
Just a quick example, when they took the ceiling tiles down at LMS, found there was a 4-inch gap between the hallways and the classroom. Fire code, major no faux pas. So when Doug and Paul were doing a walkthrough when everything was down, they were like, yeah, that's not gonna pass inspection. That has to be fixed before we put something back up. That had been existing.
And just, I wanted to clarify, just because it was brought up, and I spoke to Kyle, and he wanted to let you know, and I know that Ron kind of sent a clarifying email. We kind of opened it up to everyone for the when Kyle does the walkthrough next week, but Kyle wanted to let you know that, and he used a word for it, I can't remember what it is, but basically it's, if you want to come, it's going to be boring because he's not going to engage in any dialogue and you're just going to be watching him
So
take
I was
notes.
I was gonna touch on this. I was gonna touch on this at the
Be here
end,
for
but
6 hours.
since you've already touched on it, I'll just put a bow on it. So, Tuesday the 28th, we're asking. So Kyle will be there a little earlier. We're asking that people not show up before dismissal because it'll be too much, right?
Yeah,
So dismissal is usually done by
3:15. But
Depending
even
on- depending on traffic.
Kyle said it may not be worth the committee's. He's going to do a full report. He's going to come and report out that day.
Right.
He's not going to be engaging.
If
anyone.
you-
You're going to be watching him look at things.
Right. If you as a committee member feel as though you want to be there to visually see what he's doing because you want to make sure that it's, everything is being investigated, you are welcome to come. This is all about transparency. We want everyone to feel like we're getting good information. We don't want you to come back and say, well, did you look at this or did you look at that? If you feel, Ron will be there, and we all know Ron's attention to detail. So if you feel comfortable knowing that Ron's going to be watching, that's good. But you're welcome to come, but it is not an opportunity to really engage with Kyle and Bonnet and Stone because they need to get through the building. So, and this is also, just to be clear, not open to the public. We're not inviting community members beyond the committee. So, bow tied, we're done with that.
Like, it's package. I'd like to circle back to the points you were making and Rich was making. And what could we do differently as a committee that hasn't been done in the recent past that would be more like the Campbell Project? Seems like you guys had great success in engaging the community. How did you do it?
Can we just stay on trying to focus on the survey first, because
That's a really important question, which
it's an important question.
The same way, right? Like, did you use surveys? Did you pick up the phone and call people? Did you go knock on doors? How did you get the community engaged?
So I
We're
guess
talking about a survey. Is that even the right thing to be doing?
Well, can I add to that, which I think the question that I'm hearing you ask, and maybe I'm just thinking it myself, is there a way, or are there questions that we can ask that actually encourage engagement?
Yes.
Like, what are the right questions that will elicit follow-up, that will elicit evolve, like, honestly, something as simple as, how involved would you like to be in this process as as we go from here to potential vote on anything? We have our committee now, but how much do you want to know? Do you want quarterly updates? Do you want to know everything that
So that was I think that goes back into
and it ties into with the question earlier, which is how do you want to get the information?
How do you communicate?
And what do you want the information to
So without going, I think that's a really important question. I don't want it answered to the full extent because that will take the rest of the meeting. I guess the one question stemming from that I think is worth answering was, is trying to boil down a survey right now, are we wasting our time? Based off of your.
I think going through this is helpful. I mean, we're hashing things over. Survey be damned. We're hashing things over. We're trying to figure out what's important. And the end result of that might be a survey, it might not, but it's a good discussion no matter what. Marilyn, did we do any surveys?
I think we did. I mean, it wasn't electronic. It wasn't, I think we stood at the dump and asked people when, we did, but it wasn't that organized. The real communication came down. Well, first of all, organizationally, we had an executive team, and then each member of the executive team chaired a subcommittee, and there was a sort of building specific subcommittee, and there was an educational outcome specific subcommittee. There was a communication subcommittee. There was, honest to God, we spent probably, I think we spent, and also recognize I chaired that building committee for 8 years, so it wasn't a quick process. But we probably spent 8 months just considering enrollment projections and which formula to use.
Not for
I
suggestion.
think that's a good point. I don't know that this is going to get me some booze on Facebook, I'm sure. I don't know that we have to have a proposal for March, to solve the problem. It might take till next March, to a year from March.
Wasn't there
I
some
think we-
deadline on 8 or something?
So I mean, as with
It changes all the time.
Right, as with any
Yes,
year.
there is, it could be,
right,
but
as with any year, you know, we may or may not be in line for.
I think they just had to submit a form that says we're still working.
still
We did.
Right.
So it's
That's
actually
been
by the
But-
2025.
But back to the communication thing, because I moved to town after CHS was built, but I can tell you, one of the great losses to this town was the HLN. Because the HLN used to have the superintendent's corner, and they'd have a big thing, like every month, was it monthly, they would say, this is what's going on in the schools, here's highlighting the various things, there'd be messages.
went to
So it was
every
like-
house.
They went to every house. Now, as plugged in as I am, I have no clue what's going on in the schools. I'm not on any mailing list. I have no bloody idea.
So what you're saying is you're starting a paper?
No, no. But there was actual communication. There's actual people in the senior communities knew what was going on because every month, superintendent's corner showed up on the paper. Now it's those with kids in the school know what's going on, but the rest of us, no clue.
We had every PTO chair, every PTO had a representative on the board voting, or on the committee and voting on it. One of the things the communications committee did, and Rich and I were very much engaged in this, we took a map of the town and we divided it up A through Z, 26 areas, and every area had a champion, and they literally went door to door canvassing and talking about, you know, here's the school, here's what's proposed, what can we tell you about it, do you have any questions, and they would bring the information back, they'd encourage that dialogue in order to get people.
And one point that needs to be made is that although we had sort of backed ourselves in a corner and didn't have too much of an alternative, the connection between Litchfield and Alvern was very strong. And people had a deep feeling of loyalty toward Alvern. And any, a Litchfield High School would be too small. It could never suffice. And although we couldn't stay at Alvern, people didn't believe us. We had people who said, you're not trying hard enough. Hudson will take us. You're not trying hard enough. And man, as chairman of the school board, I knew that wasn't true. We didn't have a place there. Now, in the end, what we did was we started Campbell with freshmen and sophomores, and the juniors and seniors got to stay at Alvern to finish their term, and then we built it on. And what Marilyn said with respect to the various communities, we didn't accept the fact that there were people who would just say no. We didn't accept that. We went for every single vote. We needed 66 2/3%. We got 68%, all right? But we didn't accept. Now, there are people who will just say no matter what, but we didn't accept that. We brought people in. We went to them, and even though we knew that they were going to vote no, we made the attempt, and it paid off.
Dan, you've been raising your hand for like an hour, so.
My suggestion for the committee, I think, is two-part, which is I think this meeting has made it pretty apparent that this is a pretty complex issue that will take us many weeks, which I think is nice because it's paired with we're crashing up to the worst months for community engagement. So I suggest we take the summer, which is our 4 to 6 meetings, how many times we're going to meet in the summer, and what we're talking about tonight, which is paring down this survey, which will also get at community engagement and community involvement so that we can hit the gates running in the fall at the beginning of the school year. And that's when people are on soccer fields. That's when the summer kind of dies down and then people are starting to think about, and that's when you can really hit people. They don't mind taking the survey after the summer, with the summer relaxation. But I think to force this and possibly get it wrong or possibly miss anything when school board meets less in the summer, and that's because people are just around less in the summer, but it also gives us that opportunity to give this the time and diligence that it means that we can maybe, hit this, two-headed copper snake, which is both getting input and learning from the community while also engaging at the same time. So I think my suggestion, it's a terrible one, so hit back if you want to, but I think we've just, in this meeting, as we're coming closer to the end of it, I think what we've discovered, or at least what's clear to me, is what our task is over the summer months.
I am not a voting member, but I'm going to make a suggestion. Having these big group conversations is fantastic to have dialogue and discussion, but when it comes to action and motion, I love what Marilyn just said, and it made my ears go, ooh. If we broke off into subcommittees between meetings where, hey, I'm really into surveys, this is my jam, this is what I really want to do, then this group is going to work on surveys. Hey, I'm really in tune and in track with communication and want to help to get snippets of information together. We pull it together outside of this meeting, because an hour and a half of here, sitting here having these conversations, we're not going to get a whole lot done.
Yeah, so I think there's a balance. So I did write down subcommittees at the very beginning of the meeting, because I think that that's an important thing for all of that we have to achieve anyways. I think that the balance that we have to strike when it comes to subcommittees is,
Reporting out publicly.
but also coming into this committee, we were really looking to get wide representation, and there was a lot of different viewpoints coming in. And I think that what I've felt over the last few meetings is that we're starting to really gel as a group. Different opinions maybe, but we're starting to work through some of the things that are representative of the town as a whole. And so I want to make sure that if we do something my concern with saying, okay, there's a survey subcommittee, this is such a big topic that I think that it may be, there's subcommittees for different parts of what has to go into a survey. I think that it's an important enough thing that we will want feedback from the whole group.
I would propose that if the subcommittees are working in the interim, they come, and just as we did here, the 5 groups report back and say, here's what we worked on, and then that's the opportunity for the rest of the committee to be able to say, hey, love it, can you just look at this, what about this thought, can you go back and take that information? So it's that feedback loop is continuing.
And remind me if I'm correct, when it comes to municipal meetings, so we have to give notice, but we can notice something as a work session so that they know that we're meeting, but it's
I
not
don't even
a
know
public
if we have to
meeting, correct?
notice this, because it's, I don't,
Because it's a subcommittee?
Well, and what's the quorum number?
I think we voted on it.
7.
Quorum
If
number
it's 7,
For the whole committee, but what's the sub?
well, so if you have a subcommittee of 5, you
Oh,
don't hit the
right,
quorum.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, but I don't know that,
Well, because if you do it here, though, you're going to be up against the scheduling of.
yeah, I don't know that, I think that when you're doing stuff in
your lawyers.
yeah.
no, but I mean, when I say the work session, we can still
I'm not
meet
allowed
in
to
the
spend money
room.
on lawyers anymore.
But I'm thinking what we did earlier tonight, where we turned off the mics for,
Yeah. I
if
think
we
that
know that we're
having-
coming in here, we're gonna work in subgroups at the regularly scheduled time, just never as a committee for conversation and public dialogue. It's just really to hash out some of the
Right,
stuff.
I think that the reporting in of subcommittees in this meeting is the public component of that. I mean, listen, there comes a point where a certain amount of work has to get done, right?
Yeah, I'm just talking about the transparency.
can't do
thing.
it all
If
in 2
we notice
hours.
it as a work session, then people know that we are meeting, that no decisions are being made, that nothing's being motioned, and it won't be televised, because watching people
Yeah.
work in silence is
I tend to defer.
not exactly, riveting TV.
I tend to defer to the superintendent on things like that, because I'm not making that choice. So we can find out if, how much of this has to be noticed versus whatnot.
This gentleman in the corner had a question, if you've still.
Can I remember it?
Mr. Clinton.
My comment was about the survey. When we did the survey for the economic development thing, it was 9 questions with some options, and it was done at the opportune time, right? It was
Oh, yeah.
during election time. So we have to, I think the first survey needs to be short, right? Shouldn't be any more than 10 questions. And then to I think your point, Matt, we need to be able to take some action. That's what the Economic Development Committee, so we asked for people who would like to participate in focus groups. We had 170 people give their email addresses to join a subgroup. So that's a huge response. I said to these guys, the gentleman from the New Hampshire Development, I forget what.
NRPC.
And thank you. said initially, if we got 300 or 400 survey results, that would be amazing. We got about 1,500. Again, because it was done at the polls at a very opportune time. So, one, we have to get this communication to everybody, and this is sort of a side question. To Kerry's point, people who are involved in the schools, they get all the emails. You know, is there an opportunity for everybody in town to get on that list?
What happened to the Nixle or whatever they had? There used to be
But isn't that sort of a
I don't know.
semi-emergency thing?
it was.
But really,
then
could
were
we
informed
ask
it was
the
dumb.
community to say, if you want to know what's going on in each of the schools, get on the mailing list, and everything that you send out, Jen, and you, Dan, that goes out, the whole town knows,
Yeah,
in theory,
you could do
what's going on.
you have your parents, I'm sure, your students, and then you could have community.
All of the newsletters that we send out are posted publicly on our website, so my links in the loop that goes out every Friday is.
But that's gonna be work for somebody,
Yeah.
somebody who like me, well,
I think
Right now, it's through school, we send it out through School Messenger, so it would have to be some other system, because that School Messenger is our student information system, which is only tied to students.
All right, so to keep us on like a sensible track here, just so that way it all ties together. We came up as a group with some good overarching principles of what we want to get back. I will type those up, or Dan, I guess Dan's already typed them up. You've already typed notes on them, right?
What now?
You've already typed up like the notes on the, no?
No, just the early part.
I handwrote them, so I'll type them up.
Yeah.
And shoot those out to everyone. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions. I don't want to wait. I don't want people to feel like their time is wasted coming here. But I also am kind of, trying to figure this out as we go. I don't know the right way to do this. I mean, you guys have some good experience from Campbell, so I'm appreciating the input that you're providing from your experience. Ron took a lot of time with this, and I don't think we have enough time now to finish going through this, but I do think at some point we should revisit this after having set up our, objectives. What are thoughts on that? I know we also talked about this being a process that might take a lot of the summer.
Well, for no other reason, I think one, it will take time, and two, I think we're kind of forced into taking time because surveying during the summer, I just think is a terrible idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
So.
just don't know what you're gonna get for,
Done.
if we get, 150 responses, then what does that tell us?
Right.
Yeah.
The overall,
Right, nothing.
even if it was 1,000 responses.
Yeah.
Right. With that said, I do think that and what we should probably finish up with here is, I think it is worth identifying some subcommittees. Given the size of this group, I think we can get more bang for our buck if we maybe are interested in doing that. I know one thing that, the reason why I had the note earlier was because every time I go onto the Google Drive, I'm like, and I'm on the school board, I'm like, what am I looking at, and how is this organized?
Well, I know we mentioned reorganizing it, and
Yeah. And I think
I can
that,
tell you, I was just dumping things in there last week.
and then my
All the loose stuff.
inept Google usage, I'm like, how do I create a folder? And I couldn't figure it out,
Well,
and I
yeah, so
abandoned
that's
it.
up with the agenda, the meeting invite too. Like I get like 6 emails every time someone updates the agenda or
Yes.
something.
Because it's all live documents.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that is.
Wish I could tell you I could make that stop.
Irritating, is super irritating.
That's a good point, because I woke up one night, straight up in bed, and said, did I miss a meeting? Because you get all these emails.
the same.
Yeah, and they're confusing.
Yeah. I hear you. I feel the same way.
I would like somebody to take an action item to try to figure out a good way of getting out to the entire community. How do we solicit
The reality
emails?
is too, it doesn't have to be just for the school. There's times when the town could go to.
Absolutely. And we could start with that email list that you got for
So-
economic development.
Dump sign.
Yep, I'm sure we can share that.
So, go ahead, Ron.
On that note,
QR code.
on that note, I go back to what Carrie said. I remember fondly the same thing you do as far as the Hudson Litchfield News. I thought it was a community forum or community tool that really did provide a connection to everybody. And I think that was how we communicated. And that's, you saw one of the questions I put together, how do you communicate?
That's my favorite question.
So the difficulty right now is, I would, if I had to speculate, the primary means of communication right now is Facebook.
There's a lot of people who
But-
don't use it.
But I, for one, don't have it. I know a lot of people don't have it. So therefore, it reaches, pick a number, I don't know, some
Even though
percentage.
there's 8,000 people or whatever it is in.
Oh, yeah, but-
It doesn't reach the entire, because like you, I know a lot of people who are not on Facebook, like, what's going on?
Right.
I have no clue. I'm like, oh.
And even if you are on it, like,
The point
sifting
being,
through
let me,
all of that,
wait,
to
wait.
get any
just-
information is next to impossible.
Yeah, no,
Facebook
let me
timeline.
just finish my thought.
Yep.
So, what I envision on this survey is the only way I think that we can reach the entire town is when we figure out what the survey wants to say, is do a mass mailing, which you can do quite easily, to the entire town. And you send the survey out, that can be done manually, but we also have a link for people who want to go online and do it. And that way, we can at least make sure it gets into every household.
I do think we did some, I'd have to double check,
There was
but
a mailing about the school, I got it.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was color and glossy.
You can do that.
and-
I mean, it's
was a
it's
po-
actually.
what is that supposed to be? It was coloring.
It means
Let me
it's
just say, it was
expensive.
like, wow, no. Not, know
But you
your
received
audience. I did receive it, but know your audience. So a nice little postcard,
the
black
point-
and white with a QR code, good.
Well, I mean, so I think we need to do more of what the economic development survey said, because I didn't do it at the polls because I hate going to the polls, but I do it. So I came in here when I did it, and there was a stack of the survey papers right here at the window for me to fill it out when I renewed my car registration. So, I mean, but it's gonna be everywhere. So the QR code is great, but I can tell you that half of my neighborhood
Won't do it.
have no idea what a QR code is and how to actually follow that link. So it comes down to, it's gotta be, so the mass mailing I think is important. Having multiple locations, a dump poster with just a link and a QR code on it.
We can have it at the
I know
recycling
exactly what you're
center.
gonna say.
We put a
On
little
the sign?
drop box. No, not even on the
Oh,
sign.
you're
We're gonna
gonna
have
pick up
the
the sign.
forms with a drop box right next to it. Fill out the form while you're dropping off your stuff.
It's
Boom.
definitely a multifaceted approach, right? It's
Yep.
not just a mailer, it's not just Facebook. Like we have to attack it from all media sources.
So
Make sure it's
what I'm
everywhere, so we get it at baseball games, at soccer games, everywhere in town.
so
You
there's
can't go without seeing the sign that says take the survey.
So there's two committees that are jumping out at me like glaringly. One of them is a communication committee. I think that makes sense to have a committee, subcommittee tasked specifically with focusing on communication stuff. Just people, yes, no?
I think if you could get that, you would save yourself a lot of headache.
Yeah. The other thing I think is, which will go hand in hand, but I think is a separate committee, is an information committee. So, I mean, just the data that we have alone is not organized well, and ultimately will need to be translated over to hopefully a website refresh at some point. So I think having a committee that is well versed in what we have for information and where it's stored and
Do it at the library.
It's I won't say impossible, but.
I have a handle on it.
I also think the people that are part of the information committee have to be are folks that have the construction knowledge and the background information. Those are gonna be our key, not saying that they can't be on the communication group either, but I think those are gonna be the key people to make sure that the information is accurate for the technical terms and the technical understanding, because I think that's a place we don't wanna get hung up on.
I heard two different things though. When you said
Yeah.
information, I was thinking like IT, like organizing,
that's more what I was thinking.
like
Right.
the library, right?
Right.
Of our collective
Right.
data. And then I think what I heard you talking about is more like what our, because the names were reversed. So we were a building committee and the facilities subcommittee was just focused on bricks and mortar
Sure.
and that kind of stuff. And I agree with you that it makes most sense to have people with credentials in there.
So, if I'm hearing correctly, based on the notes I just typed, we would have 3 subcommittees, a communication committee, an information IT organization collecting data in the documents and all of the things that we disseminate to each other. And then I'm reading that we would have a facilities committee that would be in regards to the bricks and mortar of the components and the details that we get to once we get to that point.
I'm not understanding the third one.
It might be premature to
Yeah.
do that.
Well, I think the third one is related to, okay, once Kyle does a survey, what do we do then with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think,
I think,
What that would be.
We can always add more, like we can, as we continue to evolve.
And then
I-
more,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think that the two for now are actionable now.
Are you looking for that communication subcommittee to define these survey questions, or is it just how are we gonna get the survey out?
I think that, Marilyn, you look like you might have a suggestion on that, and I
was thinking of his question, which I thought was great. It's all of that,
right,
right? And yeah.
Sign you up for that then?
communication, okay. Will you write down, you can,
uh-huh.
who's doing
I gotta hear. So information committee or communication committee,
That's
who would like to be part of communication? So
Sure.
Joe L. I'm gonna join that one too. Denise? Anybody else on communication?
What about
Rich, right?
information?
I've been typing it the whole time going, am I typing the right name? I wanna make sure.
Don't even try to spell Lasalle, I get it wrong every single time.
That's not that hard.
I got my eye on you.
What about, is there anyone in here that's
S's and
excellent with
C's and
organizing
L's in there.
information?
Wells.
I am not. Not a one, huh?
For what?
What?
Organizing information.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
So
Anyone want to join Dan on his committee? Is he gonna be by
Dan
himself?
on his committee,
I'm a lone wolf.
who's
I
that?
don't mind.
Brad?
Actually, can you join Dan on
Ron?
that? Because if there's anyone that
I
knows.
say
all
Ron
of
and
it-
I probably have the
Is that
best
you?
understanding of what's actually there.
Help on that
Or
one?
not there,
Or not there.
because the FIC meeting stopped 2 years ago.
Well, actually, what would be helpful is even if you're not like a super organized person, it may be just does it, being a part of the committee with these two who have come
Is it
through the information so
legible?
many times, does it make sense to someone who hasn't looked through it 1,000 times?
No, there's a difference. He's combed through. I've lived through.
Right.
So right now I have 4 people on communication, 4 people on
Perfect.
information. Is there anyone else that wants to join one of the subcommittees?
I'll go with communication.
Communication? Thank you.
Okay.
I'll learn eventually, but I think we need name tags,
That would be great.
at
It's
least
not in the budget,
placards.
though.
I
I'll
can
have to
make
make
them.
them.
I'll make them.
Jen will make them. The last item that I think that we should quickly discuss before
Hold on,
hopefully getting
I
out
want to
of
make
here.
sure everybody's on a committee though, because we have a lot that are not.
We were going to be adding more committees though.
I think
No.
4 to 5 people is the
You
right
get
number.
too many
You don't wanna
there.
get too many.
Yeah.
All right.
Then it's the whole, yeah.
Also, we're just doing
We'll
this
have
all over again.
we'll have new committees to be
Yep.
added at some point. The last thing I want to talk about is the community member co-chair. How do we want to? Oh wait, we have to.
I think
Yeah,
we blessed
school
it, we
board.
blessed the
Bless the board,
bylaws, if
bless
you
the
will.
board, blesses the
And
guiding
then the
documents.
next meeting, we have those kind of elections.
But just so we can tell the board, what is the thought that someone will just get
There
nominated?
would be nominations.
It's in
Nominations.
there.
Okay,
It's in
Someone
there.
nominates and then we vote.
I swear I read that. I did read it.
Come on.
That's the
The,
first
the
page.
only thing, and I think as I was writing it, the only thing that, and I don't know if it's for this board to figure out, is just, is there a certain delegation of tasks, or is this also one of those things where we put it in and then it kind of builds itself and we'll get the answer when we see how it operates? Like, we have the co-chairs, but there was no delineation between the school board person does this and the citizens chair. You just kind of coexist, and maybe the airplane gets built while you're flying,
Well, I think
and I'm
it'll
okay
probably
with that.
change depending
it's
on the
gonna be that.
strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the strengths of the people sitting in the position, it's probably
I
gonna
think
change
they
as
gotta
you
work
go.
together because one's gonna cover the other one. If Matt can't be here, someone, whoever the co-chair is the de
Yeah.
facto meeting leader here.
Yeah. But it's almost one of those things where we can't necessarily know what we're looking for, but whoever it is, you guys are just gonna kind of define those roles, and that's gonna set the precedent for,
Yeah.
moving forward.
All right. Okay, so with that, Ron, thank you again for the work that you did on that. I'm sorry that we didn't get through all of it today. I hope you don't feel like we snubbed you by not going through
I
all of
think
it.
Mr. Oblinus should be on all the committees.
I don't know.
Thank you, but no.
Why
I
don't
think
you
Ron's
let
poor
Ron-
wife is not gonna agree with that because I think he's already spent a lot of time on this.
They will live.
They will live, that's right.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything?
Can I just bring up a thought before we move on?
Mhm.
One of the things that, we're kind of going week to week to week, but I think we need to kind of take a larger look at what are we trying to accomplish and what are some of the major timeframes
Mm-hmm.
that's looking at us You know, because there was talk about, okay, is there a possibility of trying to get to presenting something next March? And if so, what would have to happen and when and in a time frame for that to occur? Because there's already been discussions, you know, as the school board has, about, you know, the budget committee, you know, obviously the budget committee is key to that. So while you think March is months away, it's not.
I don't think that.
Well, I know, you don't.
I recall
know.
all too well.
I know. The point being is, I'm fearful if we don't begin to realize the proximity of these decisions and be prepared to try to march forward, then we'll lose next March as an opportunity. I would like to think it's possible that we could do something quickly. And no disrespect, but as a, for instance, you know, waiting till fall to do the survey, in one respect, puts us way off a potential schedule for March.
It may be.
Let me just finish it up.
Oh, go ahead. Continue.
I just want everybody to begin to kind of think through, okay, what has to happen? As a, for instance, the important thing for me is or critical, is we get something from Kyle next, after next week's session. All right, what are we gonna do with that? And, you know, I think you can report that after the school board has terminated those contracts. So for instance, okay, what would then have to happen to get into position? We would have to be hiring a.
Do an RFP.
Right, so that's gotta be, things like that, we need to create some outlines really quickly. And as a, for instance, who created the RFPs for the previous one? Where did that all come from? So that we need to kind of go back in and start looking at timeframes and putting,
Responsibility for each one of those things.
yeah, and understanding what the level of effort and who would be available to do that, so that we can start putting things together, because, you know, the RFP process itself will take months if, yeah, go ahead.
No, please finish your thought.
Okay, so the RFP process will take months, and I'm being optimistic, between putting it, you know, writing it, issuing it, review, hiring somebody. So,
Especially given that we're gonna have a new superintendent and new BA.
absolutely.
In that time frame.
So my question becomes to us, do we think it's potentially feasible to get ready for March? And if so, we really need to work on that. So what I would like to offer as a potential related committee is some, you know, a group of us to work on that, kind of the logistics of what would have to happen to get there. Not even understanding the results yet, but what sort of a process would we have to be marching to make that
I
happen?
think a logistics committee would be.
Ron, I don't think this committee would be the committee that makes that decision. I think that we can provide information to the board would then make decisions about writing an RFP or not writing an RFP. It's a tight window to get to March, unless we cut and paste what we already have, right?
I think it's gonna depend on the survey results too, like if it's, unless there's clear direction, we run the risk of putting all this money and resources into a proposal that gets shut down again.
So I actually, I agree, and
So
I think
we
that,
need a more, I'm more of a, maybe March is, okay, here are your three options, then which way are we going? Or whatever it is.
So-
I worry about
Maybe
investing more.
Maybe it's a petition warrant, say, okay, here are three options that we're discussing.
You don't
Which
even-
one would you favor?
You don't even need a petition, you can do it as a school board member.
I wanna hear what you have to say,
Petition
but my thought with what you were saying was, it made, the immediate things in my brain are, we need to get the information from Kyle, so we know what we're looking at with the building, that was like the biggest thing. And then, you know, from an information perspective, sort of to what Carrie was saying, even if we get an initial survey that's just gauging what of these options are acceptable,
viable.
right? Like, are acceptable. Like, if we know that someone says, absolutely not, if you close down the high school, I'm moving out of town, right? Like, we get that response, it at least then helps us like refocus. Okay, are we looking at 7 viable options? Are we looking at like 2 or 3 viable options? That may back us into like, okay, maybe it is still achievable to present something for March. I don't think we're going to know that until we get a little more information. Before you go, you've been waiting for a long time.
So, Dan DeWitt, I agree with you, but I think that information of timeline and objectives has to come from the school board, not us. We're here as an advisory to the objectives of what the school board needs, but we are an independent community advisory board, right? Committee. So that timeline, that objectives as to when the school board needs something from us in order to prepare for whatever their deadlines are set to be.
But that goes both ways because we, like as a school board, we're going to be depending on okay, so we, tell us, like if you tell me, hey, we've gotten information from the community that these are the 2 options, right? The school board may say, okay, well, that's enough information to move forward with a certain timeline. But if you say we're not,
but you got to tell us when your deadline is as to when you need those
understood. Right.
To that point, and I think I agree. Like that deadline needs to come from the school, right? Like, does the school board want to put a new proposal, regardless of what it is, on the ballot in March? And is that like their goal? Is that what they're trying to do? Because that changes our schedule. To Ron's point, we need a schedule then to meet that goal.
Yep.
If the goal is to put it on March 2026, that's a different schedule.
But I think, if I'm going to speak for the school board, I've been watching the school board meetings, is they are not in position to direct us to do X, Y, and Z. They're looking for us to give them, here's what we think X, Y, and Z should be, and they then concur.
Well,
To that point, though, I think the direction, like the board can say, we want to put something on March 25, and then we're tasked with giving them the something.
right.
But if
have no
there's no
problem,
intention to move because of other things, and this is not the year to put anything on with the building, then we know that our deadline, our timeline is now March of 20.
And the reason I bring it up is it had, the last school board meeting, there was discussion about getting ready for March, for the next.
We're always getting ready for March.
So
Well,
let's,
no, specifically,
Our existence is getting ready for March.
there was a specific discussion about having a response to GMS ready for next March.
so putting it in timeline wise though, we say March, but the reality is that's December. Because it has to come before the budget committee by mid-December to get a review, to get on the ballot, to make the stuff. So March, but it's really December. And so,
We will defer to what Carrie sets for a date, because that means that the budget committee might want to hear what we have to say if she picked the date.
That's exactly right. It's those critical dates as to when we need to have something provided.
Right.
But
And what level of something?
Right, and what level? Because, I mean, I could write an RFP and get you an RFP in 2 days. Doesn't mean anything coming from me, because if school board and budget committee and no one's going to act on it until October, why? So
we can go back. We will go back to the board and get a general consensus from the board. I mean, I can tell you as one board member, not speaking on behalf of the board, I see if there's an opportunity to give a well-defined, well-researched, well-baked-out proposal for March. Every March we have a different opportunity in terms of state aid, and we're currently in a position. So that would be my inclination would be if we could do it right and capitalize on that positioning, then absolutely. I would not be inclined to put something forward that was half-baked. So if we weren't able to do that, that would be my
good, because if it's half-baked, it's not gonna be well-received, I can guarantee you that.
I think the question that goes along with that too is like, and I think to Ron's point too, like what level of things does this committee need to do to get that proposal in the place where the school board could take it, right? Like if there needs to be architectural drawings or something done, then that's an RFP and something like that.
Right. So that gets pushed. I think that gets pushed over to us. I think ultimately where this committee passes off is this is what you school board should be investigating. So you're going to go ahead and get an RFP.
Yes and no, because the last when we did the H.L. Turner one, you know who scooped out H.L. Turner? Me. So they
We're
came.
just gonna let
It
Carrie
came
just
to
go.
it came to this committee, and we interviewed them because the understanding was that the school board didn't have the knowledge base to truly have that conversation. They wanted to bring
I'm
in
talking
people.
about putting out the RFP. I'm not
Well,
talking
putting out
about
the RFP, but
right.
the evaluating the responses should
Oh,
definitely come
this-
before people
This
here.
committee should absolutely be involved in
All right.
evaluating the responses. Absolutely.
There's steps in there, like to run, there's steps in gates, you have to pass a certain amount of time to be able to do that. Like, we have to have our decision made on what our proposal is gonna be in time for RFPs to happen.
Right.
For the school board to get to December, to get in front of the budget committee, to get on a ballot in March.
Right, because you're gonna have time for them to turn around the RFP. Yep, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to talk about baking because you just talked about it. How do we determine what is a full baked proposal? Because to you, what is a full baked proposal? You would we're all different chefs and we're cooking a little bit of a different.
Well, I can
right
guarantee.
now. What will that final proposal look like to be clear to you and every stakeholder in the community that weighs in on this?
Well, that's
Not
gonna
me,
be
but-
one of the questions
Right.
on the survey.
But I know for the budget committee, I know what we have seen.
job well done look like?
I know what we have to compare. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a fair
What you want to do
question.
is put something forward that people think you just race to get something through the March.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
That's what I
that will
don't
fail
wanna do.
miserably.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
And if this means waiting in 2026, then it means waiting.
Yes,
Can I make a request?
absolutely.
And to your point, I think that not all of us are entrenched in the process of administering a school district. And I don't know when, Rich and I and others were working through it, we had a ton of support from the SAU, and the SAU was at every meeting. And so questions about process were not something we had to debate. And I think that if you can come back with, either from the SAU or from the school board, if it's March 2025, this many months before it has to go to the budget committee, and this many months before that, right? I mean, there are procedural timeframes that could be plotted on the timeline, because they may want it, but those procedures may make it impossible,
Right.
or not, or then we know how much work we have to do if it's this March or if it's the following March. And
Yeah.
I think, I agree, we need a timeline.
Yep. So we will work to set a timeline. So you brought up a good point. So we're in this weird gray area right now where the current superintendent is only here for a few more weeks. The incoming superintendent has been participating in a lot of our meetings. He unfortunately couldn't make it tonight because he had a wake to go to. But he has been attending and participating in a lot of school district stuff on his own time outside of his other job.
Can I just go to Mr. Oblita's first point, which is my suggestion was never to stop moving forward on any of the tracks and just focus on the survey. I just said we should take advantage of the summer months to actually get the survey right, not as our only
Right, yeah.
task, but rather a focus of one of our
It's
tasks.
hard to, you can't really reel that back in if we launched it wrong.
Exactly,
So,
and I think, but I think
Yeah.
with the survey, if we can take the time with the survey, and then I know that whether it be next meeting or the meeting after, once Kyle comes in, we're not going to be talking about the survey that meeting because we're going to want to have the
Right.
conversation with Kyle. But it's a task that we work on in the summer, but not the sole task we work on over the summer.
To her point, do we need to ask for a representative from SAU?
So
be
typically,
on this committee?
typically the superintendent will be attending this.
Oh,
So
coverage.
yeah. So typically,
If you
we'll
read
have-
the documents, they're the ex officios.
He is the SAU.
and the BA typically. The BA often attends the facilities committee as well.
Business
That is business administrator. That position is also turning over. So
One year? No? Okay.
We got interviews though.
yeah,
No,
we're interviewing.
job rec is still open on Indeed.
Not it.
So real quick, we have 5 minutes left,
could
and
totally
one
do
thing that's super helpful is action items. So setting a timeline is really important. So we're going to go back to the school board, and we're going to talk about what is the school board's desire for what we're going to deliver, but also we'll get a timeline. We'll start backing into a timeline with the SAU and with the school board. As far as the next meeting goes, what do we think? We now have committees. The committees, I think, can decide if they need to meet separately. What do we think that we want to achieve for the next meeting, just to keep ourselves on track?
How much of the next meeting is dedicated to Kyle?
They're probably.
That's a great question.
So I think do Kyle and the timeline. If we can do those two things at the next meeting, I think would be a big.
I will double check with Kyle if he's.
And I also said, we get an extra week because our next meeting is actually
The 12th.
3 weeks from now.
And just so everyone's aware, actually, while we're on that point, we will be not having a meeting on June, was it 26th, I think? The school board had to reschedule our meeting, so we are gonna have to meet that day, so. Is it the 20th?
So there is no
26th.
meeting on the
This-
26th?
and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, this committee is not gonna meet every other week. It meets the second and fourth Wednesday.
Right.
That's why, so we have
I
a
was wrong
fifth
about
one,
the
so
26th,
that's
hold
why we have an extra week.
So the next meeting is when, the 5th?
The 12th. We're meeting the off Wednesday of the school board, which is the 1st and 3rd, so we're 2nd and 4th. But
So
May has
we
a-
said next meeting, we'll do, Kyle and what else? Kyle and timeline.
Kyle and the timeline, I think,
Okay,
the
we
milestone.
also get feedback from the school board and make sure we get feedback from the school board on the governance documents. And if at that time, any structure around the community co-chair.
Feedback,
I'm putting in right now in the notes, and it's shareable in the drive right now, so anybody that's in the drive, you can see my chicken scratch typing. But I put together a table that says what our action items are leaving here, which says here are the things we need to do and who is responsible. So it's a table at the bottom, and then
You're
we'll
the
add a
best.
third column that we'll be able to check off when it's done.
You are the best. Before, I just want to make sure what the, I just want to make sure that the date that we, for the meeting that we had to cancel. Do you remember, do you have it?
I thought you moved the 19th to the 26th.
Yes, the 19th to the 26th.
The 19th.
We're gonna start early on the 5th because.
This is the
it's
school
senior night.
board that we're talking about, not
And
the,
then-
Right, so the 26th one is canceled. It's not
26th is-
rescheduled.
26 is just canceled
Yes,
For us.
I will be gone.
for you, for all of you. Me and
I
Peter
mean,
will
I'm
still
sorry, I
be
will see
here.
you all.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Sally.
FIC meeting for the 26th
Yes.
is canceled.
All right,
So, but we do have the prior meeting,
On the
Right.
still
12th.
scheduled on the 12th.
sweet.
Correct. Okay,
Can I ask a clarifying question? So the committees have been formulated, and in the interim between now and the next meeting, are we intending on meeting outside of this room to report back? Are we intending on just holding off? What's the plan right now with that? Because I'm not clear on that result.
Can I offer I would like, or suggest that the communications group take the questions and based on what we talked about tonight and work on a draft of rewriting the questions.
Oh, your action item is to get the broad themes out to everybody,
The what?
thank you.
so that he can work on the questions. If
I-
go onto those broad themes.
They're all in the,
They're all in the document.
I would agree with that.
Can't find on the Google.
I will send them, I will send them as an email. Yes, I will send them as an email, so that way they're compiled and pushed to you directly.
2 meetings from now, redraft of the questions and themes from the communications group and
Yep.
ideas for communicating it.
And while everything's in the drive, in the meantime, Ron and I and whoever else is on the information committee will try to organize the drive, so.
Who do I
with
get
us.
my email to get on that drive?
One day may be different than the
On the
last.
the
what?
hard
I
drive.
need to get on that Google Drive. I didn't get an invite.
You didn't?
Okay.
I had to
Um,
look for it. It was way back.
That would be Dr. Jetty.
It was like when the first.
Oh, no,
meeting-
actually, no, he's passed that off. That would be
I thought
Renee.
you just passed away.
No,
Oh, my.
hopefully not. That would be Renee.
so you're
It
doing,
might be nice to just send that link out to everyone so it's at the top of it.
The information subcommittee is.
I can't
working
give them
on
access,
organizing the
though, so
drive.
I have to, whoever owns the drive has to.
You have to invite it to
It's
them.
an email issue, because I got it today.
I'll send you an email, Matt.
Send me an email.
you have to have a Gmail associated in order to be part of the drive.
Okay,
I think it's worthy of note that Brad is here. This is multi-generational because his mother worked on the Campbell project.
oh, that's,
Anne was on the school board.
Ann was on the school board.
let's hope we can spare your children from having to. All right, I think we're 45 seconds over, so thank you all.
Do you remember to, you want to speak to Kevin Planty?
I did not.
Say hello to your mother.
Remember, put it down on your thing.
Oh, will she?
Talk to her.
I've seen her in years.